Hi guys, welcome to another edition of All Things Football. Today we are dedicating this episode to the Tottenham Hotspurs fans, seeing that they now have a new manager in place, finally, some would say, after a very long quest for a new manager. With me on the call is Charlie Eccleshare. He's a well-respected Athletic UK journalist. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good, thanks, good, thanks. So Charlie, let's get into it. Nuno Espírito Santo is the new Spurs manager. They had many candidates that were interviewed. Ultimately, they've now decided to go for him. Can you tell us how this appointment came about and how they finally decided that he was the right candidate, having gone through so many before him?
Yeah, well, it took 72 days from the sacking of Jose Mourinho to finally appointing a successor. And eventually they settled on Nuno. I mean, as you say, they've gone through so many candidates. Some decided it wasn't for them. Some Spurs decided that they weren't the right fit. Nuno, initially they had thought of, but then didn't think was quite right. But eventually they did come back to him. And it was the new incoming director of football, Fabio Paratici, who kind of made the case to Levy. He was impressed by the way Nuno had developed players at Wolves, given young players a chance, and felt that actually Nuno was more flexible tactically than maybe he's been given credit for. I think he tends to be seen as quite pragmatic and conservative. And the pragmatic thing is probably true, but the idea is that maybe with different players at Spurs, he might be a bit more front-footed. And Levy was convinced. And so finally, this week, after more than 2 months of searching, Spurs had their man.
So they've got their man, but my dad's a Spurs supporter, so when I think of Spurs, there's always that sense that they play with front football. They like to attack, whereas Nuno is very much, he likes to play three at the back, more solid in terms of defense. How is that taken to the fans in the fact that he's probably not a Spurs type of manager in terms of how he sets the team up, but how do you think the fans have taken to that?
I think one of the issues here, and I've written about this actually this week, is that I think Nuno is a fine appointment, but it's at odds with what Daniel Levy said in May, where he talked about appointing someone with free-flowing, attacking football, who had Spurs DNA and all of this kind of thing. That seems not in keeping really with Nuno. As I say, like some think that this idea of him being very defensive and conservative is a little unfair, but as you say, he set his team up with three at the back at Wolves, all about shape, all about discipline, which is fine and is a good way of winning football matches, but it's not necessarily free-flowing and attacking, to use Levy's terminology. So I think there has been some disappointment in that regard, but there's also, amongst a lot of fans I speak to, just relief that they've got anyone in. But at this point, pre-season starts on Monday, and to have gone into that without a manager just would have, not really set the right tone. So, I think there is that disappointment that he maybe isn't quite what they felt they were promised in May. But I think most now just want to get behind him and, hope maybe it works out.
Let's hope so for his sake. He signed a 2-year deal, which is in many cases quite short for a manager. So it shows that Spurs don't quite have the trust in him, but also it's also going to give him a chance to prove himself, which hopefully he does for the sake of the fans. You touched on the new director of football. Tell us more about his role that he's going to have at Spurs, because what type of say is he going to have? Is he going to have the ultimate say with regards to transfers, or is that still going to be with the manager? How is the new director of football going to work?
Yeah, it's really interesting, this dynamic, and I wrote a profile on Paratici this week looking at his history, but also this key question that a lot of fans are asking is, well, what does that mean for Levy? And people within the game are asking that question as well. People who work with Tottenham and who normally have these meetings with Daniel Levy or phone calls or whatever, they're suddenly asking, okay, so now is it going to be Paratici who I speak to? There's also Steve Hitchin, who formerly led on the recruitment side. Paratici, I think he will want autonomy on the football side, really. Now, Daniel Levy is a very hands-on owner, but Paratici had something similar with Agnelli at Juventus in his previous job. So he's experienced that kind of managing up side of things. as for Nuno and the head coach, I mean, he is very much a head coach. That's how he operates. And the idea is that you appoint someone like Paratici, so he kind of oversees the strategy when it comes to signings, and then your head coach is tasked with kind of implementing the way of playing with those players that, to an extent, he's told this is who you're signing. And some head coaches feel less comfortable than that with others. What's interesting is that obviously at Wolves, there was this whole Jorge Mendes dynamic, which a lot of fans, Tottenham fans, are worried about. That remains to be seen. But yeah, Paratici will kind of come in and have oversight of the football side of things. And he was instrumental in bringing Nuno to the club, and he will be instrumental in deciding what sort of players they want to bring in this summer.
So speaking about the summer ahead, it's a huge summer in terms of Spurs. Harry Kane, obviously, the big question is, will he stay? Will he go? How do you see things panning out in terms of the transfer window? There's been talk of Alderweireld leaving. So how do you see things moving in terms of the transfer window? Are they going to try and keep as many of the players as possible so that they can keep the base of the squad there? Or is it going to be quite a important summer in terms of a lot of players leaving, a lot of players coming in and rebuilding from scratch?
Yeah, it's a huge summer. I mean, Pochettino talked about this painful rebuild a couple of years ago, and you've sort of seen that come to play the next couple of years. Alderweireld, I reported today that he's told the club he wants to leave. And I think there is a sense that there will be a clear out, or there needs to be a clear out this summer, because there are a lot of players who've been there a long time and maybe, their best days are behind them. So one of the biggest challenges that Paratici has this summer is actually selling players. And it's so difficult because it's such a compressed market. So you've got guys who a couple of years ago were on long contracts, and Levy would have been thinking, right, they're going to bring in 20, 30, 40 million, whatever. Now you're suddenly thinking, can we get a fee for these guys? So it's really, really hard. And then, as you say, the big question is, will Harry Kane stay or go? And the thing there that's positive for Tottenham fans is that really he doesn't have any power in this situation, because he's contracted at the club for another 3 years. And so I suppose one of two things will happen. Either if for him to have to go, and my hunch is, I don't know, it's about 50-50, but I think he may well end up staying because he doesn't have the power. But either Levy would have to think, well, Spurs need the money if they're going to do this big rebuild, and Kane's the best way they can do that. Or Kane is going to have to make a real fuss and almost say he's not going to play. But I just can't see that happening because of Kane being the kind of character he is. We know he has such a fantastic attitude. I just don't quite see that. So I don't know. It's probably going to drag on and on and on. I'd love, for Spurs' sake and my own professionally, for there to be clarity before August 31st, because otherwise it's going to be a long couple of months. But I suspect it will go right to the wire.
Speaking of transfers, do we have any news in terms of incomings? I know they've been chasing a Japanese centre-back from Serie A, I think it is. Tell us any news on incomings for Spurs fans?
Yeah, we reported on that yesterday, actually. Tomiyasu from Bologna, who can play as a right-back or a centre-back, particularly in a 3, which would suit Nuno. They're looking to get a couple of other centre-backs. That's a big priority area for them. Paratici wants to improve there. I mean, we saw how vulnerable Spurs were last season. You've got Koundé at Sevilla, Milan Skriniar at Inter Milan. These are guys that are on their list. There are a couple of others as well. So I think those are the kind of big noises I'm hearing at the moment, incomings. I mean, there probably will be other signings as well. They don't have a huge amount to spend. So that's why, again, it's so important that they're able to raise some funds by selling players. And there are a lot of players who would be available for transfer and have been available for transfer really for some time, but it's finding buyers for some of those more fringe sort of players. But yeah, centre-back is a big priority area, especially if Nuno is going to play 3 at the back.
So my last question to you, Charlie. In terms of the season ahead, what sort of target are Spurs going to aim for? Because I mean, it's a big rebuild. It's a new manager. Lots of moving parts in terms of Spurs at the moment. What are their goals going to be? Are they going to go for top 4? Is it perhaps the top 6 only that they're going to aim for, or what is the aim for the season?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, last season they finished 7th, so outside of the Europa League, and they're in the Europa Conference League, which is kind of this competition no one really wants to be in. I mean, I think top 4 has to be the aim. They have to believe that they can do that. You know, what tends to happen each season is obviously that there's the big 6, then you've got Leicester. And the opening tends to be there for Champions League qualification because 1 or 2 clubs will sort of implode. You know, often it's been Arsenal in recent years. Tottenham have done a fair bit of that as well. But you might also get a Liverpool or a Chelsea or a United, to a lesser extent City. I'd be amazed if they did. But, you know, there are often teams who don't quite live up to expectations. So I think the opportunity will be there. So I don't think right now they'd take necessarily anything lower than that because they'll feel they very much should be getting top 6 and back into the Europa League. So yeah, I think it's top 4, a trophy. You know, it will be 14 years come next calendar year by the time they're able to win a trophy. So that's a huge thing. But I think, you know, realistically for most people at the club, if they're offered top 4 or a trophy, they take top 4. You know, missing out on Champions League 2 years running, their revenues were slashed. Match day revenue, they were more reliant on match day revenues than pretty much any club, them and Arsenal. So that's been a huge issue for them. So to get the financial bonus of the Champions League is all important, really.
It's going to make for an interesting watch in terms of how Spurs actually go about things and if they achieve the targets. But that's the beauty of the Premier League. We just don't know which way it's going to go. Charlie, I want to thank you for your time, for availing yourself to talk to us here on All Things Football. Charlie is, again, a well-respected journalist with The Athletic. So please check out his articles and, to give him a follow on Twitter as well. Charlie, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Cool, no problem.
Thanks, guys. And don't forget to subscribe and like our YouTube channel. Thank you.